Hi, it's me Stitches. Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome to my first official video here on YouTube. Now, have you ever gone through your linen closet and just wanted to get rid of a bunch of things? Well, I have, and I had a bunch of these. So I had a bunch of these little thin little blankets, didn't know what to do with. So I'm going to upcycle them. And this video pretty much is going to show you how I did it. Unfortunately, I did lose a lot of footage on the actual construction of the garment, but it does have some helpful tips on it on how to make bias tape and some other things. So hopefully you enjoy. So let's start off with, this is the blanket that I ended up using for the construction of the garment that I'm currently making for this video. As you can see, it's very thin, and I did have to take off all the original bias tape that was on the blanket so that I could use it again later. And this did feel like it took forever to do. Okay, so these are the patterns I'm going to use for this particular project. I'm going to start off with using for the torso a pattern I developed from a Renaissance costume a few years ago, and I'll go ahead and put a video here showing how I draped it. If you'd like to see more about that, I can go ahead and make a separate video. This is a standard shirt sleeve pattern from a dress shirt that I retraced onto tissue paper. I can try to find the original pattern number for this, but it is from a 1970s pattern. But yeah, I can go ahead and put that right here. And let's get started. And this is where I mentioned where I lost the footage of me actually cutting the pattern out, but this is what I have so far. And now I need to go and get some fabric to match this trim so I can go around the big collar and around the back. I do have some from that I did take off, but it's not going to be enough to go around the collar and the bottom of the sleeves. But yeah, this is what I get when I do recycling. Didn't like the blanket, but it's going to make a nice house coat instead. So I made a quick trip to Joann's and I found some clearance fabric that matched the trim that I'm going to use for the underside of the collar, which eventually turned into the upper side of the collar. I also purchased a couple fat squares to make for into bias. So the amount of trim that I had from the original blanket was not enough to go all the way around. So I have two fat quarters that kind of match. This one matches more, and I'll go ahead and make this into bias tape, and I can show you how to do that. So starting off with one fat square, I basically turned it into quilter's binding, but this video may help with describing how it actually works.
14 feet of continuous bias tape binding from a fat quarter. Slice a 45-degree angle along one of the longer sides. Right sides together. Align the raw edges of the short side, stitching up with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Lining up with the raw edge of one of the diagonals. Draw a line in 2-inch increments. Line up two endpoints from the same line. Shimmy down so that the end of one line joins at the beginning of the next. Stitch up the seam at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And trim along the continuous line in 14 feet of continuous bias tape binding from a fat quarter.
So I hope that video helped explain how to turn a basic fat square into 14 feet of bias tape. Now, I didn't do it exactly the way MX Domestic did it, but it's basically the same thing. As you can see here, I've already pressed out the fabric and I'm drawing my 2-inch increments so that I can start turning this into bias tape. I did put it into fast forward because it is kind of a boring process, but you can see right here. Basically just draw your lines until you can't make 2-inch increments anymore. And for the parts that are not 2 inches, you're going to basically just cut that off and omit that. So discard that part. Then you're going to go ahead and line up your stripes, but offset the first one so that it basically creates this tube type thing. And then go ahead and start cutting one continuous line of your bias tape. As you can see, I did switch scissors because I use those scissors normally for my sewing machine only, and these are my actual fabric shears. And with that, you have 14 feet of continuous bias tape. Now the first thing we got to do is turn this into a single fold bias tape. And I'll go ahead and show you how to do that like this. This is what I normally do. I pin down my bias tape tool so that it becomes hands-free. I pin it straight down to the ironing board. Pin it down so it doesn't move on you while you're doing this. Then go ahead and feed one end of the bias tape through the tool, but you want to make sure that you're working from the quote-unquote wrong side of the fabric, so all your seams will be enclosed inside your bias tape. Then go ahead and press it down, but be very careful because this does get hot. Extremely hot. I did almost burn my finger at one point with getting this through, as you can see right here. Ouchie. But go ahead and just pull your fabric through, leaving the iron in place, and keep the steam on so that you can basically turn this into bias tape. As you can see, I did speed it up, but there you go. And just keep pulling and pulling slowly and using the steam. And ta-da! There is your 14 feet of continuous bias tape that you made from one fat square. Hopefully this helps. And these fat squares are pretty cheap, so this actually saves you a lot of money. So I did start off with attaching the original bias tape the way the manufacturer attached it so that the edging would match. As you can see here, I was struggling with this polyester before switching over to the cotton. So attach the bias tape so that it matches all the way around your garment, and then add your bias tape that you actually made to the new areas. Again, I did lose a lot of footage of the actual construction of the garment itself, but here is me constructing the sleeve before I inset it in. I went ahead and seamed it up and did this to both sleeves before basically pinning and attaching it to the main body of the garment. I then put some bias tape around the cuffs to finish it off. So after everything is said and done, this is what was left of the project when done. So not very much waste is going to go in the trash. So here's time for the reveal. And here we go with the reveal. Here is my Victorian inspired house coat slash smoking coat slash lounge coat slash bath coat. And here we go. Enjoying a cup of tea out on the patio and showing off that it has pockets. And it has two of them. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey in this construction of this Victorian-inspired housecoat. And if this is the type of content that you like, please join me for the next episode. So remember, stay happy and keep those tails wagging. I'll see you next time. Auf Wiedersehen.